Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is the podcast that talks about location-independent businesses, living internationally, and living the life that you really want to lead. My name's Jonathan Lockwood. I'm here with James Guzman. Hey, James.
Hey, Jonathan. How's it going?
Good. Well, I'm kind of excited about this. We're doing a slightly different topic today. This is your idea, and I thought it was a good one given the circumstances we find ourselves in right now. Who's our guest today?
Yeah, so, there's been all kinds of things going on within the last week. This Chinese market collapse, a lot of things going on with its decision in Greece. And then we had the New York Stock Exchange kind of had this glitch, and was it American Airlines and Wall Street Journal, all these types of things. And I don't know that they all have to do with one another, but it's a lot of interesting things going on. So I wanted to talk to somebody that kind of, that looks into these things, at the financial markets and this type of stuff. So I got a friend of mine, Olav, and we used to hang out in Madrid. He was studying with Jesus Huerta de Soto, who's a very esteemed Austrian economic guy there. He's written some very good books, and he has a great program. And so he was studying there, and he's gone on to kind of be a financial analyst for a gold company that is Gold Republic. So anyways, I thought I'd just have him on. So Olav, how's it going?
Thank you for having me, James.
Yeah.
Very glad to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. So you're also involved in, I guess you said, Hedgehog Capital, right? What do you guys do with that?
Well, I basically had many people interested in my philosophy, which is based on Austrian economics. And I actually manage some other people's money on the side. So, but that's a side business for me. I do it because I would manage my own portfolio. So I just took some money in from others and I started investing with that too.
Yeah.
So what Hedgehog Capital basically does is it tries to invest in extremely under or overvalued markets all around the world, any asset class.
Yeah. All right. Now, I think most people will be familiar that listen to this podcast, but some people might not be familiar with the difference between Austrian economics and different types of economics. Maybe, I don't want to get too much into this, but just as quickly as possible, can you kind of differentiate how maybe your outlook might be different from what they see on CNBC or something like that?
Yeah, let's keep it to the monetary theory about money.
Right.
I think it differs in the sense that more emphasis is put on logical thinking, basically, and not a lot of confidence we don't have a lot of confidence in mathematical models, for instance. Mm-hmm. So we know the limitations of mathematical models, and we know that in the end, economics is a social science. So there's certain economic laws, for instance, of supply and demand that also apply for money. But it's a social science. That's the key thing. And we think many economists make the mistake to see it as a natural science and see people as atoms. And that's the big difference.
Yeah, and I think that one of the major implications is kind of, the idea of sound money. And I think this definitely ties into what we're talking about today with the whole Greek deal and the thing in China as well, that from an Austrian perspective, the major problem with all this is all the cheap money that's been flooding into these types of markets. So maybe, we could begin talking about Greece. I think that, you're over there in Amsterdam right now. So I'm sure that you've been analyzing this a lot and taking a look at what's going on there. So how would you boil it down to what is going on right now with this decision?
Sure. So we basically have what we already had years ago, which is somebody called it a Mexican standoff. Nobody wins, and the Greek government tries to force their hand, threaten with default every time to get more bailout money. And the Europeans are trying to impose some kind of austerity, which doesn't really work because the Greek government mostly uses taxes and not spending cuts for austerity. So there's a ball game which is already taking many years, since 2010, 2011. And of course, the main problem is the debt and the Greek spending and the state of the economy there. It's a really unhealthy economy with a lot of privileges, really rigged labor market. So it's a very difficult case. And of course, it has major implications for the euro. Let's say, first of all, that Greece never should have been allowed into the euro, first of all. And now we're looking for a solution, which is, there's not really a solution to this problem. Mm-hmm. So from here on, there are a few scenarios possible. I think the most, this Sunday is probably the last deadline, because the 20th of July, they have to pay up some bonds. And if they don't, they'll default, will be official default. And the ECB, it will trigger a credit event. And, then Greece will be effectively in bankruptcy. So that's the base case. And I think Sunday we'll get a call, and I think there will be another bailout for Greece from European governments, and we'll kick the can down the road another time again.
You got to be kidding me, really. I mean, it's just to make sure people who are as clueless as I am or somewhere near me, so several years ago, many of these nations in Europe threw in together. They decided to create the European Union. It came along with the euro, and they were all coming from different backgrounds, different behaviors, different ways of thinking about money. But they thought that they would be safe by creating laws. Well, it'll be okay because we'll say that nobody can have a debt to GDP ratio that's higher than this. Nobody can do this. Nobody can do that. But of course, there were ways around that. And now you've got, my understanding is, Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal that are all in serious trouble. Of course, Greece leading the way. So you say there's no way out of this, but you think, despite the fact that Greece voted not to take any more from the European Union, you think it's going to happen anyway.
Yes, it's funny because, of course, we had the Greek Prime Minister taking resort to a referendum in Greece to let the people vote about the proposal they got an agreement on with the Eurogroup. And the thing is, he's now backing down because he sees how fragile the banking system in Greece is. And really, if they don't have a deal before Sunday, Monday already, the banking system in Greece will be almost bankrupt. There's no money left. There's no financing from the ECB. And there's only one way out. There's going to be another bailout with part of the money going to the banks. And even then, there's not a guarantee that everything will work out. But that's the base case. Actually, the finance minister, the Greek finance minister, after the referendum, he stepped down. And he's actually now trying within his party, trying to persuade everybody to vote against. Well, it already passed the parliament, but he tried to convince the parliament to say no against the proposal made by Tsipras, the Greek prime minister, which is now offered to the Eurogroup. So it's really interesting. And of course, it shows to me that Tsipras, the current prime minister, really wants this deal. He sees how necessary the bailout, another bailout, is. Otherwise, he'd be sitting on a giant mess. And really, if there's a Grexit, if Greece leaves the euro, then there will be a huge banking crisis similar to the one we had in Argentina in 2001, with banks again closing down. They're already been closed for 2 weeks, but also a haircut on people's savings and deposits of maybe 20, 30, 40, 50%. And also, of course, a devaluation of the Greek currency or the parallel currency they'll use, as well as a high inflation. And there's many problems right now already. I read a story yesterday about a Greek factory which couldn't get their hands on the raw materials they needed because they couldn't get any credit, trade credit that is, commercial credit, to finance the purchase of raw materials. So he said, we need the credit within 1 week, otherwise I have to close down the factory, and over 200 people will be out of work. And that's how dire the situation right now is in Greece.
Yeah, so I guess you just think they can continue to kick the can down the road. I mean, I know that that's what everybody wants to do, but I just think about it. It's like, how long can that happen? This is one thing we all kind of look at the economies, not just Europe, but kind of all these things all over the world. That it doesn't seem to make any sense with all the debt. I mean, how long do you think that this can just be, the can be kicked down the road and none of this actually comes to a head?
Well, it causes a lot of instability. For instance, we will have new elections in Spain later this year, and the big brother or the twin brother of Syriza in Greece is Podemos in Spain, and they actually lead in the polls with, I think, 25-30%. And if they win, they'll try to get better conditions as well from Europe. They're trying to renegotiate the bailout terms, and they're even talking about leaving the euro. So there's a lot of instability already built in, and I think what will bring the euro down in the end will be bond rates. Greece never had bond rates so low, interest rates. They couldn't borrow possibly before the euro against so low interest rates. And the same goes for Spain, same goes for Italy. I think 3 months ago, interest rates in Europe bottomed. So we had the Spanish government, which could borrow, I think, 10 years for 1.5%. And it already doubled in over 3 months. So in March, European interest rates bottomed, and now we've already seen a rally we've seen bond yields coming up substantially in Spain from 1.5% to 3% in just 3 months. So there's a lot of volatility. I think what will cause or what will force politicians to face the consequences and not be able to kick the can down the road anymore will be higher interest rates.
Right.
And we're already seeing some of that back in bond yields right now in the Eurozone.
Yeah. Well, this will be very interesting to see what happens this Sunday. I did see just recently that it looks like, they have kind of, I don't know whether you would consider it caved in or not, but that they are going to take this $3.5 billion bailout. So, yeah, it looks like that might be what happens here. I don't know how, well, let me ask you a question. I mean, the people that are in Greece, their constituency, they're going to be upset about this, right? I mean, didn't they just vote no on this? So I'd like to get your opinion on, number one, what do you think about this, voting no? I've had people say, oh, that's great, they vote no, and the other people say, oh, no, well, they just don't want to, live within their means. Number one, what do you think about that no vote? And then number two, so now that we know that a lot of people don't want to take it, what do you think that's going to happen? Is that very important as far as the people on the street? Are they going to cause a lot of problems for this if they do take the bailout?
Yes, perhaps many people are too short-sighted, so they can't see the real consequences of saying no. But at the same time, we should also see, we can also blame the Eurogroup and the IMF for everything they put Greece through over the past few years. So they called for austerity, and what they did was actually just raise taxes. I think corporate taxes are 30-40%. They're now talking about raising VAT to 23%, which I think is one of the highest in the world. So what they didn't do is open up the economy, break down barriers, and cut taxes, but they did the exact opposite. They strangled the economy more. And of course, that's part of the philosophy which is dominant right now in Greece. But of course, the IMF and the Troika contributed to that substantially. And they shouldn't have pushed for higher taxes, higher taxation, more rules, and the like. So there's blame from that side as well. What I think is that the people cannot foresee the consequences they're faced with right now. A possible banking crisis, maybe even hyperinflation, when people try to get out of the new currency, the drachma, in this case, when they leave the euro. So I think people are too short-sighted. It's mostly propaganda based. Of course, we had Tsipras himself asking for a no vote from the people. And in the beginning, it was 50-50, I think. And the thing is, it's not about wanting to be in the euro or wanting to be outside of the euro, because many polls show that the Greek people want to stay in the euro. So they do understand that it would be very bad to go back to their own currency. But at the same time, they don't want to have the austerity anymore, but they're not willing to make the necessary spending cuts. And that's the dominant philosophy in Greece. So they want to have the pleasures without the pain.
Yeah,
and that's something that's impossible in this world.
Yeah. So what do you think when reality does come, and they have to take these types of measures, or what? I don't know what happens, but they're probably not going to be very happy about this bailout happening and these different measures that's going to be forced upon them. So, what do you think the reaction is going to be with that?
I think the issue splits the country in two sides. So you already see a lot of tension between the two groups. Before the vote, there were protests from both sides, with both sides having a lot of people in the protests. I think the most significant thing is not actually on the streets, but within the party within the Syriza party itself, because there's a very socialist, very leftist constituency in that party, which is trying to force Tsipras to not take the deal, to ask for debt relief, and some more radical, take a more radical approach to the whole issue. While Tsipras right now is trying to be more pragmatic, and he's trying to get that money in for Greece, and he's willing to make promises he probably can't fulfill in the future, but he's more pragmatic than the rest of his party. So I see mostly problems from within his party than in society. I think this whole crisis does split Greece up in two parts, and that's very bad socially, of course.
Yeah. How do you see in the future the whole Eurozone working out? Do you think that it'll continue on and maybe grow and become stronger, or do you see it breaking apart sometime in the near future?
Well, I think the euro in the end will be doomed, because I already predicted 4 years ago that within 5 years the euro would end in its current form, and they've taken the wrong route. So they actually had to leave Greece in bankruptcy in the very first time, not do any bailouts to Greece or other countries, just let them fail within the euro, keep them in the euro, and then the euro would be able to get stronger and work as a proxy of a gold standard. Because for the first time in many years in countries such as Greece and Spain, we're seeing politicians not taking the easy way out. That's a devaluation of the currency. The peseta in Spain would be devalued with 30, 40, 50%, and they would go on with their terrible, terrible policies, government policies. So it's really working right now as a proxy of the gold standard, and that's a really good thing for the Greeks, for the Spanish people, and for the other countries. But they took the other route, and they're trying to patch everything with bailouts, with more money, but the money will end. We're just waiting until the market stops the whole process. If rates will rise, and then it will end, then it will be an end game, because Greece is a very small country, a very small economy within Europe, and it's already causing significant problems. And we're seeing countries like France, for instance, right now, with a record unemployment, with terrible government policies as well, and many other countries struggling too, such as Spain still struggling, even though they're making some progress at the first sight, and Portugal as well. So we're now in an environment where interest rates have come down, where I think what European governments spend on interest every year is at a record low, but that will change. It won't be forever. And that's what is going to set off higher deficits, higher debt, and a negative spiral. And at a certain point in time, the other governments, like the Dutch government or the German government, Finnish government, won't be able to bail out the bigger countries such as Spain, and that will be basically the beginning of the end of the euro.
That's the thing. I mean, we're looking at Greece right now, and we're focusing on it, but as you're indicating, there are a number of other countries that are on the verge of something similar. So there's no telling how that all plays out when other countries start falling just like dominoes, right?
That's the whole case. So a lot of in the media, you right now hear a lot about analysts saying that it won't be so significant. Greece is not significant. Banks do not have any exposure to Greece, etc. That it won't be just a minor glitch. But the whole thing are the indirect consequences, not the direct consequences, mostly on, for instance, investor sentiment in Spain. I think interest rates will rise in Spain, in Italy, in other countries in the coming years. And that's a secondary consequence of maybe Greece leaving the Eurozone, which is not taken into account by many commentators right now.
Yes. All right. Well, I appreciate that, Olav. And so this will be interesting to see what happens because, I mean, let's say they go ahead and take the bailout. Ultimately, they're just, like you say, kicking the can down the road. And isn't it sad that brings some people some kind of comfort? It's not that different here. We're in Mexico, but it's not that difficult in the United States. They're facing the same type of thing where people, like you say, they want the pleasure, but they don't want the pain. And this is not how life frickin' works. So anyway, we'll come back to you in just a moment. Right now, we want to take some time to thank our sponsor. Today's Borderless podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group, the people who pride themselves in caring, well, more than you. Recently, a federal judge ordered cancellations for the trademark registrations of football team the Washington Redskins for what some consider an insensitive name. And with all of the controversy regarding the use of the Confederate flag, the Condescending Group has been staying up nights for potential concern over their own name, the Condescending Group. Some have expressed the word "the" is oppressive, since it may diminish the existence of other condescending people and groups, as if they're the only one. Still others have focused on the word condescending itself. Although the most accurate descriptor of our wonderfully snotty sponsor, it's been suggested that the word descending is part of condescending, and the Condescending Group feels they'd rather convey something more uplifting instead. One Condescending Group faction even conducted a highly unscientific poll, which they say proves that since descending suggests a downward action, it may well cause feelings of inadequacy and anguish in some who are in need of free-flowing admiration and fake, silly praise just to get through the day. With this information in, they are considering the elimination of both the and condescending, and heretofore going forth simply with the word group to identify themselves. It potentially makes people subliminally feel better and fits squarely in line with their collectivist philosophy. The condescending, group, they care more than you. Okay, so we're back with our guest today, Olav Dirkmaat. He is with goldrepublic.com and a student of Austrian economics, and he's trying to give us a picture of what the likely scenarios are given the Greek situation. But there's more than just the Greek situation that we're facing right now in this point of time, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to talk to him about this Chinese thing. I mean, from the way that I look at it, this collapse in the Chinese stock market is a much bigger story than the Greece situation. What do you think, Olav?
Well, I think both are significant, and I actually think the Greek thing is leaking over to it leaked over to the Chinese stock market and maybe contributed to the crash. But it's very interesting, and what is going on in China, of course, is very important. But it's not something out of the ordinary for me.
For people that might not be familiar with it, I mean, what the Chinese stock market went down, like 30% within the last 2 or 3 weeks, something like that?
30%. And to give you a little bit of context, we already had a bubble, of course, in China in 2007 when stocks also went down quite substantially. It was a big correction there as well. And I think the same factors contributed to this bubble and the subsequent correction. So we should get a little bit context because we're used, I mean, you are both from North America, I'm from Europe. It's very different for us, then it's really difficult for us to imagine how a Chinese retail investor invests because they're actually very limited in their options. Mm-hmm. They can either invest in the Chinese stock market, in Chinese real estate or in gold, or they can put their savings into a bank account, Chinese bank account, but the interest rates in China on savings accounts are kept or linked to the central bank interest rate. And actually the central bank has been lowering interest rates for the past 6 months or year or so. So it's actually Chinese people are not allowed to invest abroad. And that's very important because we're not used to limitations like that. I mean, most Americans can invest almost everywhere in the world, not Myanmar, maybe some other countries aside. Europeans can mostly invest in all countries around the world, but Chinese cannot. So there are a few options, and with interest rates getting lower, they propped up. There was a big real estate bubble, of course, and now it is a stock market bubble similar to the one in 2007. What was different this time was the reaction of the authorities because they cracked down. They really cracked down on short sellers. They suspended trading. They did all kinds of things to prevent prices from falling, and that is very strange to me.
Yeah, prevent the market for to correct and to be where it should be. So they have to step in and get the evil speculators, and then the government's like buying I don't know how much of the stock market there. But that is definitely not the right course of action, especially from an Austrian perspective that we want to see, right?
It's not, and they did all kinds of stupid things that never work and never have worked, like banning short selling, suspending trading. In the end, prices will fall, and it's just plain logical thinking because prices have been running up for the past year quite substantially before the correction, and we're just going down back to healthy, normal levels. So there's actually no reason for the Chinese government to get involved in this mad way because they actually try to intimidate traders. They actually forced big shareholders. Well, big shareholders cannot sell their stock for the next 6 months. Mm-hmm. They're not allowed to. They've been cracking down on short sellers, as you told. I think few people got arrested, got intimidated by authorities. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I've heard they've been doing the same with people with property, that, selling your property right now, that they've been, saying that you're not allowed to do that, intimidating people and threatening them and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we see the same thing in the stock market, of course. I actually have a source in China, and he got a few calls from banks to borrow money or to pledge collateral to borrow money to invest in the stock market. So they were actually clamping down on the people, on retail investors, to borrow more money to buy more stocks. Wow. And that's the height of the craze, I think, of the crazy, of the boom, of the bubble.
Yeah. Well, are you familiar with the? I know that there are Chinese people that somehow they buy real estate in Canada and on the west coast of the United States, or so. I'm not sure about all the technicality of that, but is that not Chinese citizens or their family members or something like that? Because I've heard that can be a major effect of this crash, is that these just cash real estate investors that come into Canada and the west coast of the United States are not going to be there anymore.
Yeah, so there are a few workarounds, of course, especially through Hong Kong, but I think that's minor compared to the rest of the retail investor crowd in China. Most of the people have their money in gold, in Chinese stocks, in real estate, especially in housing. So I don't think it will be a big problem. We also had a story, of course, about gold, because the story ran, I think, in Bloomberg, saying that gold was being used as collateral to borrow money to buy stocks. And since many investors, of course, were getting margin calls because of the stock market crash, they were speculating there will be a massive wave of gold selling in the next week or so. And I actually investigated a little bit more in detail, and it turned out, well, at least my conclusion was that it wouldn't be that much of a problem still, especially because for Chinese retail investors have a small share of their savings in the stock market. I think the exact number would be around 12 or 15% of their entire wealth. So that's not as substantial as many might think.
What does all of this mean for a person who is interested in a bright future, okay? An individual, what does this mean to us? How shall we live? How shall we make decisions with our banking, with our investments? How can we learn from the situation that's going on here? How can we protect ourselves from fallout?
Yeah, I think that we have to differentiate a bit, because in Europe we have huge structural issues which will certainly cause problems down the road. But as an investor, I do like China. I think they're one of the best. I think they have the best capitalists in the world. They make some mistakes, of course, but they have a high savings rate. They know they need to invest. They need to save money. So I'm pretty positive about China down the line. And of course, there will be problems like this stock market crash. But in the end, I think China will still be the next United States, perhaps. And I think we have more structural problems in the US and Europe, where we have a really overvalued stock market, especially in the US, which will cause substantial pain down the line for many pensioners. In my country, in the Netherlands, many pensions are invested solely in stocks and bonds. And I mean, we have one of the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest bond bubble ever blown up. And we have a really expensive stock market, which will come down eventually. And then many people are left with the pieces and with the pain. So I think there are many structural issues, especially in the Western world, where we have a population that is aging. We have gigantic debt. I think the U.S. is the biggest debtor nation in the history of the world. And as opposed to China, where I might invest if prices come down. So I'm pretty positive about Asia, most of Asia, but not about the Western world and markets.
Okay, so what do you do? What does a person do? Are you a believer in precious metals?
Yeah, of course. So I went into the precious metals industry because of a reason, because I think it's a good place to be the coming years, the coming decade. And I do think gold should be one of the most important assets in many people's portfolio. Of course, I also invest for myself and for others in stocks and bonds in any asset class. So I might take a little bit more risk in some other assets. But I think for most people who are looking to safeguard their pension and get a decent real return on their portfolio, I think gold and precious metals and even commodities in general will be the best space to be the next, let's say, 5 years.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this before, but I think that kind of goes along with this podcast. I mean, you're a big believer in kind of investing in these types of places, making money, and like over there in Amsterdam where you are, and then kind of looking in other places to live. More less expensive places, kind of taking an international type of approach. So that's cool.
It is. It's very interesting. I mean, the world is very big. One of my objectives is to visit every country in the world during my lifetime. I've been in many countries already. I'm really blessed to have been able to visit so many countries, and it's really nice to live outside of Europe, outside of the US, because there's so much more. And yes, it's a lifestyle that suits me. Right.
Say that there's somebody that wants to get started in financial analysis or something like that you're doing now. What would you say would be the best way that they get involved in that market?
So I think you start with the books. You read the books. I think that's the most important habit you should have if you're in finance. I think Charlie Munger even said it. Everybody he knows that's a good investor reads a lot. So I try to read a book a week or maybe a book every 2 weeks. And I think if you want to get into finance, that's a habit you should definitely adopt. And there are many books to start with. I always recommend Human Action of Ludwig von Mises, which is an Austrian economist. It's a pretty hard book to start with, but I think it's a good starting point.
And kudos to you, as hard as it is. You translated that book into Dutch, didn't you?
Yeah, that's true. So we actually wanted to make it more accessible to a larger public, and we're just trying to distribute the book among academics, influential people, and get the Austrian school more into mainstream in this country.
Yeah, well, that's great. I think that you're going to be down here sometime in Latin America soon, so look forward to seeing you and talking with you as things go on. But man, it's gonna be a very interesting next couple months, I think.
Definitely, I think we're in one of the most exciting and most interesting times in history, and the past few months have been really volatile. And to me, it's amazing, for instance, the gold price is not doing anything despite all the news we have been getting, all the news that is coming out right now. Because if this all would have happened in 2011, the market reaction would be 180 degrees different. But I think we'll get there.
Thank you so much, Olav Dirkmaat of GoldRepublic.com and Hedgehog Capital, for being a guest on the Borderless podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, James, for inviting me.
All right, so different kind of podcast, but necessary. We talk about traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. We seem to be tapping into a thing where people are very interested in leaving their country and living more internationally. But one of the reasons for that is because maybe they're not happy where they are economically. There are scary issues in the world, and there are some advantages for leaving your home country. Yeah,
I think a lot of people, it might seem boring or something like that, but it is stuff that you want to keep on top of, especially if you're living internationally and have businesses or investments and stuff like that. This is something you're going to have to stay on top of. So I might get Olav on regularly, or somebody that can tell us about the markets, maybe some financial investment recommendations and things like that, and we'll see how we can work some information like that into the podcast.
You earlier this week told me that we had our biggest day of downloads. Is that right?
Yeah, that was just this last week.
So it's been interesting how this works out. I was just looking at iTunes here, and we've got more reviews. That I don't look as often as I should, but we've got a couple of recent ones here just from the last week. Somebody named Quantumplator came in saying, "This is my new favorite podcast. You guys are amazing. Keep up the good work. You've got 2 more dedicated listeners." Thank you, Quantumplator. He titled that, "Oh My." Okay, good. And then there's another one entitled "Game-Changing Encouragement" from someone named Heidi Lynn Harris. "These discussions are much needed and appreciated." Well, thank you, Heidi. We appreciate your listening and finding value in it. It's funny because James wanted to do this podcast. I have a studio. I said, let's do this. I wasn't sure where this was going to go. I'm sure James wasn't either, and it's worked out that a lot of people have benefited from it. In fact, there was somebody I got friended on Facebook. This happens to me all the time. Mm-hmm. I get friended on Facebook, and a lot of times it's a really hot girl. Yeah. And I'm like, it's so a funny thing goes on in my ego. I think, this is just some sort of scam. But I think maybe, it's a really hot girl. And I look, no, I don't even understand what they want to do. Yeah. They don't live anywhere near here. What do they do? So, I might friend them, find out they're just sending sexy pictures or something, and I just unfriend them. But I got one the other day from someone named Dylan Harris. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't know. So do we have a mutual friend, Dylan? And he just said, basically, his answer was, "Indeed, sir, you and James have changed my life and my fiance's life." I'm like, uh-oh, what's that mean? He says, "I'm on my second run through all of your podcasts. I cannot thank you enough for the work you guys are doing." And, he loves the Condescending group. He's a big supporter of them. And he's a web developer. And in fact, he said, that during this time, he's listening to all of these things, and it's given he and his fiance. He lives in San Luis Obispo, California, there in the central coast of California. And he said that he wants to do this now. He wants to leave the U.S. And what he's going to do is he's gotten an invitation from his mother. He and his fiance are moving in to his mother's house somewhere in Washington State. And they're going to save money. He's a software developer. He's going to work on his business and becoming location independent. And he says, now, I'm not kidding. He says, the first thing we're going to do is come right to San Miguel and buy you and James drinks and give you hugs.
All right, well.
So anyway, that's cool. And we appreciate that. And so he's a big supporter of the show.
That's always great. Yeah, there's actually a guy coming in town Monday. Also, I forgot to mention that to you. Man, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but anyways, that should be interesting. I think we're going to have lunch. And
I've been getting messages from someone named Kathleen Sheridan. It first started a few months ago. She had found Jim Carger's interview you did with him on the website, and then my interview. And she's been sending emails, and we talked again a little bit. She's, I think it seems like she's maybe middle-aged in her 40s, perhaps something else. She lives out on the East Coast, and they're coming to San Miguel later this year, I believe, in November. And she personally, a bit more than her husband, she tells me, is very concerned about the way things are going in the U.S. And, I get this a lot. I have felt this a lot. So, my advice to her is that I've got kind of like I'm buffeted by two guardians. One of them, in line with the topic of this show, is reminding me that the world, we're talking about Greece, we're talking about China, we're talking about the U.S., is moving in some dangerous directions, and I need to be prepared. But the other one reminds me, and you've said this yourself, James, that these psychos have already done an amazing job of keeping the balls in the air, and we shouldn't underestimate their ability to continue doing so.
Right.
So that first guardian keeps me on my toes. The second kind of does remind me not to panic.
Yeah.
Panic does us no good anyway. Let's make no mistake. Things are jacked the hell up. And mathematically, it's ridiculous. If a family ran their household like these governments do, it's children. It's ridiculous children. And when I look at, it's like, well, is there any sign that things could pull out of this? When I say pull out of this, I mean out of the immediate danger of complete collapse. Right, yeah. I'm not talking about anything that's healthy. Yeah. Now, some of the things that we talk about sometimes, though, there are a lot of positive things happening in the world, though.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Technology is an amazing assistance to life right now. So let's look at some of the positive things.
Actually, and I actually think that it is a positive move. I mean, I do think that negative things are going to happen in the coming years, and it's going to be very volatile. But at least within probably my entire lifetime, it's just going to be very volatile, and there are going to be a lot of opportunities. There's going to be even more people that are put in a worse circumstance, And if you continue to just, think in this kind of the industrial age and nation state type of mentality, that's when it's not going to work for you. You got to think about the new technologies, how we're communicating now, how businesses are based, and all this type of thing. So I think it's the people that are versatile and can incorporate these types of things and actually unlearn the things that they've learned in the past and now relearn what's going on now. Those are going to be the people that come out on top. So I think that's what it's all about, and I hope to bring all these tools and this type of information to the audience of the podcast.
Right. I agree with this. A friend of mine has been hanging out in Argentina for about a month now, and flexible, is kind of the word. He's talking about these people in Argentina are going through a very difficult time, but they've been through it before. A lot of countries have. So the thing is, those of us, so I'm 49 years old, it's like, I'm looking for a life of comfort and ease.
Right.
I have mostly had a fairly comfortable, easy life. Well, I better get prepared for things to happen in this world that may not be so comfortable and easy. But that doesn't mean roving bands of zombies.
Yeah.
The people in Argentina are figuring out ways around these capital controls. Mm-hmm. They're figuring out ways around these terrible things that are going on there. People are using Bitcoin in Argentina. Yeah. People are using U.S. dollars. Mm-hmm. If you rent an apartment, there is one price is it a peso, the Argentinian peso? Mm-hmm. I think it is. There's one price, and it's very high. But if you're using U.S. dollars, it's almost half if you use U.S. dollars. Anyway, the people are not idiots. They're smart. They've been through this stuff before, and they will survive. And so this is the best thing for myself and our listeners we can do. If you're concerned about these things, learn to be flexible and don't expect things to be rosy the rest of your life.
Yeah, and that goes along with why I think that we had the most downloads this Monday, and that's because I put out this video. I'm sure a lot of people in the network and the audience have seen it, but I put out this video with Professor Robert Higgs, and I actually attended some lectures with him out there in Auburn, Alabama, when I was in Mises University, and basically he was telling his students that he didn't think that the stay and fight mentality is very good, and how he said was the attitude of a damn fool to sacrifice yourself and your family just to stand up to the state, because he didn't think it was a possible thing. So he is moving down here to Quintana Roo. And so anyways, got a lot of I actually, funny thing, there was definitely some negative people that commented on it, but a vast majority, it was positive.
Right.
So
to me, it reminds me a little bit of this thing we're going to transition into a little bit. For me, again, this is my same shit all the time. I see the sentiments that people throw up all the time as being sort of religious in nature, sort of emotional and religious. So it's like the moment you start talking about concern over the United States, there is this religion, this nationalistic patriotism. And I don't mean to condemn people who feel that in a way that I don't, but they get pissed off at you if you don't share that sentiment,
right?
Because it's kind of like their religion. So, if you say something about concern about the U.S. government and the way they're behaving, oh, really? I guess Mexico just must be fucking great. Shit running in the streets. They'll give you that. It's like, no. I believe that all governments are pretty similar. Mm-hmm. The U.S. government just happens to be really super powerful. And you've got a situation in the United States where not all, but many people are still kind of blinded to the reality of it.
Right.
Here in Mexico, people kind of know they're slaves.
Yeah.
They're not laboring under any illusions that they're not. But in the United States, many people still believe they live as fully free people, and they don't.
What's funny? What I think is one of the major contributors to that a lot of people don't realize until they move outside of the United States is just simply the TV. To be honest with you, everybody watching this news on the giant high definition TVs, and they get all their opinions programmed into. They sit there and watch hours and hours of people screaming at each other, and they all talk about the same thing in unison. It's absolutely amazing. It's mass mind control that you really don't see to that extent anywhere else that I've lived. You certainly don't have that here in Mexico. Nobody sits there and watches the Mexican news and is just arguing about whatever they see on the news every day.
And so in line with that, you saw what I did. I posted yesterday. I actually, on my personal Facebook page, I really have, if you looked at me over the course of the last year, you see I very rarely post anything political. I make some exceptions when I see really clear-cut cases of insane police brutality. Sometimes I'll post that. When I sometimes will post articles about the threats on the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. I do that. But this whole thing about these Dutch people, the IRS on the hunt for Americans, which you posted yesterday and I reposted. Tell us about that. What happened?
Yeah, so it only had 3 people there, but there were just 3 different cases. And these types of cases are popping up all the time. I know a guy that is dealing with these type of situations all the time now, and I hope he's already agreed to get on the podcast, so we should have him on for the next month or so. But basically, they are Dutch people who have never been to the United States, never worked in the United States, never lived in the United States, don't speak English, and they have just been caught up in this FACTA thing where the United States, the IRS basically has come in and said that you are a United States person and you owe us all this money. And you have to fill out all this paperwork in English, and then they're going in between the Dutch embassy and the United States embassy, and it's just a huge mess. One guy had to give up his mortgage. Another person has had their bank account locked, and all kinds of different things. But it's just ridiculous, and especially to see people that defend this type of stuff, it's just insane.
It is. This gets back to the kind of the religious fervor, in my opinion. So the guy lost his mortgage, owes $42,000 in taxes. The Dutch woman, I thought this was funny. So she owes all of this money. They freeze her bank account. Right. She can't get a penny out of her bank account. She has no money. You're told, well, it's very aggressive language is what they're all saying. And the Dutch authorities hate this. Yeah. They don't like it, but they can't do anything because if the banks allow this to happen, the U.S. government is going to create great problems for them, probably the 30% withholding sanction that they're going to put on them. So this woman is like, well, you have to prove to us that you don't owe us anything. Enter your U.S. Social Security number here. I don't have a fucking U.S. Social Security number, she says. Well, tough shit. Looks like you better apply for one, doesn't it, bitch? This is essentially, it's like, what? Yeah. I got what? So, and the Dutch people are probably inflamed, red-faced over this, but there's nothing we can do. Yeah. And so you talk about this. Most people, in my opinion, most Americans, they're busy as hell. I don't blame them for not knowing about this stuff. Yeah. When they see it right off the bat, most of them go, what? Yeah. when they hear about the FACTA thing, about the way the United States government is trying to control all of the world's banks and expecting all of this, they think, what? And they think, wow. Or they say, I must not be getting the whole story. There must be other aspects of this. And sure enough, I get a person who comes in and saying, this was a treaty.
Yeah.
Oh, that word treaty has just made this all okay. Yeah. They were American citizens, but they weren't necessarily citizens, were they?
No, well, I mean, the video does not specify it, but it says that they are American nationals. They have nationalism. American nationals.
Nationality.
Yeah, they have U.S. nationality. That could, in this video mean that they're U.S. persons. It doesn't sound like. I mean, the lady doesn't have a social security number, so she wouldn't be a citizen. Right. And the other people, like they had an American parent or something like that. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a U.S. citizen. You have to apply for your citizenship, but you can't be eligible for it. But to be under the jurisdiction of the IRS, especially with this FACTA thing, is you need to be a U.S. person, which is only defined in U.S. courts, and it seems to be an ever-expanding definition that they can make up in whatever the hell they want it to mean. I really think that the people that defend the IRS and this type of thing, I mean, they have these ideals about what taxation is in the state, and they're very lofty ideals, and I don't think that they've ever actually looked at cases that have happened with the IRS. I have a really special hatred for the IRS because they have done so many inhumane things, just absolutely ridiculous things to a lot of people, and most people are just absolutely oblivious to how evil this corporation or this entity is that just goes, and now it's just spreading its tentacles all throughout the world in places that it's incredible.
So there are people, who, when you start talking about laws, slavery used to be the law.
Right.
Right? And when you start talking about things like immigration, for instance, on the U.S. border with Mexicans and Central Americans coming up, you and I are both very, concerned about that. We don't like the situation there. But this particular this frame of mind is very understanding and sad for those people. When you start talking about, but it's the law.
Right.
They're like, well, fuck the law.
Yeah.
But in this situation, for some reason, the law, we are a nation of laws, this woman says. Don't you believe in the rule of law? In this particular case, all of a sudden, it's very, very important. And then you start asking, why is it? It's a sort of, to me, kind of narcissism that is common to the United States, to the IRS, for instance, to the U.S. government. Why is it that other countries don't do this? Do other countries have anything like this?
Right.
There's like one, right?
No. Yeah.
Eritrea?
No, yeah. This
in East Africa?
Tiny, tyrannical island that has had all these human rights abuse violations.
No, but right.
That's it. That's the only other person.
So why is it all of these other countries, they may tax the shit out of you when you're in their country, but when you leave, they're like, well, who the hell am I?
Yeah.
To be taxing you when you leave. Well, her perspective is, you better believe if some political bullshit popped off, they'd run straight to the U.S. Embassy for assistance. She lives in this American fantasy world.
I know.
They have the privileges of American citizens. Let them pay.
What is the privilege?
Because this all comes under the umbrella of people trying to get out of taxes.
Yeah, right.
And so it brings up all of the religion, which makes it okay for there to be laws about this in this case, but not in the cases where they don't care about
this.
And
actually, you're not allowed to renounce for tax purposes.
So she said that to me. There's a guy on here who I really don't know very well. He lives in Mexico. He's an ex-Jehovah's Witness like I am. By the way, this woman is also an ex-Jehovah's Witness. And I don't think he and I really agree on many things in life, but because he chimed in on this, why don't you and your Saltillo Cafe homeboy, why don't you go apply for Mexican citizenship and renounce loyalty to the U.S.? That's funny. Not renounce citizenship, but renounce loyalty. There's a little religion for you there. I have no loyalty to the U.S., okay? All right? In case you think I did, I don't.
Yeah.
And what would happen if I did try to renounce my citizenship?
Yeah.
What would?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you just have to say that it was for some other reason for tax purposes. But in these people's, situation, you say, oh, well, they should just renounce and then they have to pay an exit tax and all this. That's ridiculous. And, the people that say that, well, why don't you just renounce? Well, I mean, okay, And guess what? That's what a lot of people are doing. It's called brain drain. Okay? That's called the best and the brightest leaving the damn country. And you know what that causes? That causes economic catastrophe. So, all right, you don't want to be reasonable with people. You don't want to be logical with people. And you just tell them, well, just get out. Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. All right. Well, that's fine. And that's what people are doing. So you get your wish.
And it's so funny. I like in her line of reasoning, she came in with something completely off topic. I don't believe anybody was talking about expats or immigrants or anything like that. She comes in there, you see, when people of color want to go to another country, they get called immigrants. But you, why white people expats? What did this have to do with anything? Yeah. It's so funny because I remember a couple of years ago when I was visiting Chile and here, she would come in and say, oh, I love expats. I think it's great, the expat life. Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, she's found a way to inject a racial angle into this where there is none. Yeah. So this is more religion. Absolutely. I'm going to find a way to be right and spread my bullshit. I mean, it's so sad. And I didn't respond. Yeah. Because, pearls before swine, I guess. So, anyway.
Well, anyways, there was a lot of people that commented on that video that I made that, there's no escape and that doesn't solve the problem and all this type of thing. And, the only thing I want to say is, it certainly solves the problem for me. I'm doing fine. I enjoy living here. I don't maybe you like living in some city in the United States. I mean, I don't. I moved out in 2008. I've gone back and visited, and I haven't enjoyed it. So it has absolutely solved the problem for me. And I think that it would for a lot of people. And I think that they don't realize that because they're just sitting there and probably haven't even gone anywhere outside of their, side of the country, let alone in another country. But moving yourself and your family out of danger's way or into a place that you're not feeling well or comfortable or whatever certainly does solve the problem.
If you don't see danger, fine. Stay where you are. Nobody here is trying to tell you that.
Right.
Furthermore, if you don't harmonize with these feelings, that's fine. We're talking about what we believe is a monstrous beast, that of the U.S. government and agencies like the IRS. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about you. Yeah, it is true. I think some people are not aware of all of these things, but it's none of my business to jam it down your throat. Yeah. And if you don't feel that way, it's fine. It's when you start using your ideology to force your beliefs, your religion of patriotism down my throat, that's where I'm willing to speak up. And I'm not going to hide the things that the U.S. government is doing, just to make people with a religious feeling about the government feel better.
Yeah. Yeah, another comment I got a lot was, he's like, coward. Chicken shit,
Really?
A lot, yeah, a lot.
What's chicken shit?
Just the same thing. Coward. Oh, you should. You're supposed to be standing and fighting if you don't like what the government is doing. You're running away, and you need to stand your ground and all this type of stuff. And I don't know. The only thing I would say is only a coward would be afraid of what another coward calls you a coward, so I could care less what a person like that says.
I tell all of my friends, I never like to, as strongly as I feel that there is no mathematical way out of these problems. Mm-hmm. I tell them, look, if you do, well, that's your opinion, I respect it. Please let me know when you see a situation where mathematically things start really changing course, where politicians stop promising people, like Olav said earlier, a bunch of pleasure without all the pain. I don't see them stopping that. Right. I don't see the majority of American people understanding truly where they are fiscally. And so I don't see any hope for those reasons. Right. So I don't want to complain anymore. I just wanted to go. And so I went.
Yeah. And it's funny. There's a lot of people like that, these, I don't know, whatever. Normally they want to go shoot it out with the government or something like that. Jim Carger, he wrote a piece on that. I don't know if you ever read it, but it was about 3 or 4 years ago, saying that, like, when they come for your guns, you will give them up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I did read that.
Yeah, and he got a lot of the same, criticism. People saying, "Oh, this guy's just a coward," and blah blah blah. And he's like, "No. When the SWAT team, when you get, if that's what you're worried about, if you're worried about a militaristic police state and they're going to come and you're going to go shoot it out with them, you ain't shooting it out with anybody. Right. You know what I mean? That they will come to your house and they will give it up, or else you're going to be lying dead on the floor." So
right. Yeah. So anyway, well, we've talked about a lot of stuff today. Mm-hmm. I got pretty passionate there. Yeah. I don't usually do that, but the fact of the matter is we don't know where the future is headed. And I, for one, don't want to act like I do, but I do see enough to make me concerned about the future and to decide to be prepared. I'm grateful that I have the type of work that I can be location independent. And so if I can be location independent, if I can take some actions to be more prepared about the potential consequences of governments and their actions, I want to do it. So I have done it. And if other people are interested in doing it, well, we hope to be able to provide you with a network, with support, and some good ideas for how you can actualize that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if this is the first time that you're listening to the podcast, then, please go to the website. It's borderlesspodcast.com. And what you'll see right at the top is an orange button there. And, I'm just really giving a lot of stuff to people that sign up now. We've got a free ebook that'll help you find a place that you want to live. I'll give you access to our private Borderless Network Facebook page. A lot of people on there from all over the world that, have been doing this and are just starting to do this throughout all different parts of their borderless journey. And also just recently I'm offering free consultation, 20 minutes. If you're thinking about doing this, you don't know how to get started, just put your email in there and it'll send a form to request that. And, I can talk to you about how you can get started, maybe hook you up with some people that, can help you get to the next part of this journey if this is what you want to do.
Great. And coming up soon, I've been talking with some people, about this. There are particular countries that people are interested in. I've got an expert in Uruguay, Paraguay, and also in Ecuador that we can potentially have come on the podcast here and give us some I'm making sure I get good people here who can give the average person a really good idea about what it will be like to live there, what it will cost, all of those things. And I've been talking with the guy with Crypto Hippie.
Yeah.
I have not looked into these things as much as I should. It looks compelling to me. And so when he gets back from vacation, I think we're going to set up a podcast with him too.
Yeah. And if somebody knows an expert on a Bitcoin, I'd love to talk about that. That might know some practical ways that, expats can use that, a way that you can have a location independent business and use Bitcoin. I know a lot of people that talk about theory and how they see it going, but I'd like to talk to someone that knows, a lot of different ways that we can incorporate that into businesses. So
that'd be great. Okay. So a lot of exciting things coming up. Listen again for another Borderless podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.